promised to give him a rundown at some point, which made it better. "We should check it out," Tarek said. He was wearing a sweater 3 times too big for him and skinny pants. It made him look a little like a bobblehead. "And, Dan, you should join us. I might be able to get us free tickets. I know the lead techie." "I don't know. I've never really liked Macbeth. It hits too close to home for OCD people like me," Dan deadpanned, rubbing furiously at an invisible stain on his sleeve. Both Missy and Tarek stared back at him blankly. "You know," he chuckled weakly. "Out, damned spot?" "Oh, is that from the play?" Tarek asked. "Yeah, it's like one of the most famous lines." He frowned. "Abby and Jordan would have gotten it. Didn't everyone have to read Macbeth for school? Anyway, I'll see you guys later." Dan peeled off from the group and headed upstairs. He pulled out his phone and sent off a quick text to both Jordan and Abby. "Nobody here gets my sense of humor. Help!" 20 minutes later, when he was sitting bored in class, Jordan still hadn't texted back, and Abby had sent a lukewarm LOL. What was wrong? Where had his friends gone? It wasn't like they were that busy. Just last week, Jordan had been telling him on Facebook chat how insanely tedious his classes were. Nothing was challenging, he'd said, after the classes at the New Hampshire College prep program. Dan sympathized, but honestly, the classes were the last thing he remembered from their summer in New Hampshire. What he couldn't stop thinking about was what had happened in their dorm. Brookline, formerly an insane asylum run by a twisted warden, Daniel Crawford. When he wasn't thinking about that small detail, though, he was thinking about Jordan and Abby. When they'd first returned from the college campus, he'd gotten texts and emails from them constantly, but now they hardly talked. Missy, Tarek, and Beckett were okay, he supposed, but Jordan and Abby were different. Jordan knew how to push his buttons, but it was always good-natured and made the 3 of them laugh. And if Jordan pushed a little too hard, Abby was there to call him out and restore the balance. Really, she was the linchpin that held their group together. A group that, in Dan's mind, seemed worth keeping up. So why were his friends ignoring him? Dan glanced at the clock, groaning. 2 more hours until the end of the day. 2 more hours until he could dash home and get online to see if his friends wanted to chat. He sighed and scooted down into his seat, reluctantly putting his phone away. Strange to think that a place as dangerous as Brookline had brought them together, and normal life was pulling them apart. A half-eaten peanut butter sandwich sat on the plate next to his laptop. At his feet, his AP history textbook collected leaves. The crisp fall air normally helped him focus, but instead of doing homework, like he really ought to, he was busy going through the file he had made about Brookline. After the prep program ended, Dan had made sure to organize the notes he'd made, the research he'd done, and the photographs he'd collected, and turn it into one neat file. He found himself returning to browse through it more than he should. Even with all these original documents, so much of the warden's history was still missing. And after learning that he might actually be related to the warden through his birth parents, that this horrible man might be his great-uncle and even his namesake, Dan felt like this was a hole in his personal history, a mystery that he very much needed to solve. At the moment, though, the file was just a distracting way to pass the time while he waited for Jordan and Abby to log on. What was that phrase his dad always liked to use? Hurry up and wait. "Could I be any more pathetic?" Dan muttered, pushing both hands into his dark, messy hair. "I think you're just fine, sweetheart." Right. Better to keep the gloomy asides silent in the future. Dan looked up to see his mom, Sandy, standing on the porch, smiling at him. She was holding a steaming cup of cocoa, one he hoped was for him. "Hard at work?" she asked, nodding to the forgotten textbook on the floor at his feet. "I'm almost done," he replied.